Update now on the attacks by Houthi rebels in the Red Sea that have forced shipping companies to avoid the Suez Canal, and those diversions driving up freight prices. CNBC's learned that prices are as high as $10,000 per 40-foot container. They were being quoted for Shanghai to UK transit as of yesterday. Just last week, those rates were less than $2,500. Joining us right now to talk about that conflict and so much more ahead of the holiday season, Tom Friedman, New York Times foreign affairs columnist and the author of From Beirut to Jerusalem, of course, and, well, about a million other books. But we're trying to relate back to where, unfortunately, where the conflict is right now, Tom. Nice to see you.
You too, Andrew.
Let's talk about what's happening just in the Red Sea and then maybe contextualize that, bring Iran into it, and then maybe we go to Israel and everything else. But how do you see this playing itself out, and how do you see the dominoes falling one way or the other?
Well, Andrew, let me start from 30,000 feet and then go to 10,000 feet and then to sea level, if I could. From 30,000 feet, I felt from the very start of the war between Hamas and Israel that basically what was going on in the world was that Ukraine was trying to join the West and Israel was trying to join the East through normalization with Saudi Arabia. And Russia and Iran and their proxies got together to block both. So I think that's what's happening globally. At the next level down, basically, Iran, well, if you think about it this way, Andrew, the U.S. has two aircraft carrier groups in the region right now, one in the Eastern Mediterranean and one in the Persian Gulf. Iran has four what I call landcraft carriers. They're called the Houthis. In Yemen, they're called Hezbollah in Lebanon, they're called Hamas in Gaza, they're called Shia militias in Iraq. And Iran uses its landcraft carriers to project power and influence around the region and advance its goal of driving America and Israel out, the way we project power through our aircraft carriers. But their landcraft carriers are on the ground. Iran can use them as proxies, hide behind them, etc. So that's sort of from 10,000 feet. From sea level, you have the Houthis, who are this group of Yemeni tribesmen who in 2014 came down from the north. They're an offshoot of Shiites, some close relations with Iran, to take over Yemen and impose their authority on all the other tribes, triggering a civil war. Saudi Arabia got involved. We got involved with the side of the Saudis, the Iranians on the other side, etc. The war has died down. They've been sort of working off a ceasefire of late. But there's still a lot of competition because the way the war ended, there's sort of a balance of power now between the different tribes. But the Houthis are hoping to sort of steal a march on all the others by showing themselves as the great defenders of Palestine and their ability to lob rockets at Israel. So that's sort of what's going on. Now, the Saudis are very concerned. They basically told the Houthis, you know, whatever you do, don't lob any rockets at Israel over Saudi Arabia because we don't want to have to shoot them down. We don't want to have to look like we're protecting Israel. So the Houthis act basically over the Red Sea, et cetera. We've now got this U.S.-led, I think, 10-nation coalition to try to deal with this. But basically, I think what our Arab allies are saying, like, don't get in a war with these guys because that's kind of what they want. And at the same time, not sure how to stop them. The Omanis are trying to work a deal. That's where we are this morning.
So let's go back to the 30,000-foot piece of this, though, because maybe that's the most important piece of this, which is where do you see what's happening in Israel with the Palestinians going? I don't know directionally what you think is going to happen in Israel proper, but as it relates to Iran and this larger piece.
Well, if you've been following me from the start, you'll know I was very wary about Israel going into Gaza for two reasons. One, it clearly had no endgame. It had no defined end goal. And so it was launching its army against Hamas in retaliation for the murderous and barbaric attack by Hamas on Israel on October 7th. Fully justified by Israel in responding to that, of course, but it had no endgame. That is, it had no political goal in Gaza in mind that would allow Israel to either stay there indefinitely in a way that was politically, diplomatically sustainable and have some Palestinian partner. Why doesn't it have an endgame? Because members of Israel's far-right government under Netanyahu refused to have any talk of Palestinian state or the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank taking over Gaza. So I was worried about that. Second, all you have to do is follow Israeli politics to know that the elite there is not together at all. There's lots of infighting within the elite. And when you launch a war as important as Gaza without an elite that is aligned, that's very, very unnerving to me. So the war has now inflicted terrible damage on Hamas infrastructure and on Gazan civilians. Thousands of people have been killed. And it's gone at some level. The Israelis have discovered a lot of tunnels. They've inflicted a lot of damage. But if you read Haaretz this morning, their top military correspondent, the war's also going very, very slowly, very costly. Israel is a reserve army, so it's high-tech economy. A lot of those guys, you're working for those high-tech companies that you guys have reported on, are now in the streets of Gaza. And so it's not in a long-term sustainable situation.